Hello, and welcome back to Practically Political. I'm Dave Spencer. It's great to have you with us.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, whatever holiday you have, we're glad to have you. And we're also glad to have our special guest, Karina Lipsman. She's a friend and neighbor since I live in the congressional district where she ran. She ran a noble race against the incumbent Congressman, Democrat Don Beyer, and gave him a run for his money. This is in 2022, and she joins us now. She now is fighting communism. I think, again, doing more noble work. She's with the Victims of Communism Museum, the VOC, and they're doing amazing work on education, which would love to hear more about that from her. But Karina, welcome.
Thank you so much, Carrie, and thank you, Dave, for having me.
Great to have you.
So, Karina, we're just coming off this election where the Republicans came, just through and had a resounding victory. What's your vantage point? What do you think is going to happen from an electoral standpoint? Or I guess when you're looking ahead for Republicans, do you think that this is a durable majority? Is the country center right? And if so, are you going to run again?
Never say never. Probably not this cycle or next cycle. But I'm very excited with the results of the election. I think the American people spoke using their voting rights. And so having the majority both in the House, the Senate, and then having the White House is going to be incredible for our nation. It's going to be incredible for the wonderful work that Victims of Communism is doing. And I think that we are really going to see the next 4 years unfold in a prosperous way. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what President Trump does and Vice President Vance do.
Well, as Carrie's heard me say, I as a Rockefeller Republican, and unfortunately, I think we're just about extinct these days, because that means socially liberal and fiscally conservative, which, to put it mildly, is not today's Republican Party. But I always said, and that it wasn't that I was pro-Harris. I wasn't. I have major problems with the Biden administration. I mean, they did a few good things, but I think he was largely ineffectual, and a lot of the reasons that he lost the election were legitimate. But my hope was that I will also say that I just think a second Trump term posed unacceptable risks. That was my problem. I would have happily voted for Nikki Haley. I would have even voted for Ron DeSantis. But having said that, Harris not winning, the second best outcome was Trump winning convincingly. He was only the second president since George H.W. Bush to win the popular vote. And that was always the claim of Democrats. Oh, well, they may have won the Electoral College, but we got more votes. Well, this is not the case. And so I'm hoping that, and again, this may be a little naivete, that Trump does actually care about his legacy. He does seem to be a little more mellow in his press conferences. I think age will do that to you as well. So, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. And I am going to say that I hope things work out. I think some of the nominees are disastrous. We'll get to that later in the show. But as I said, I think anyone deserves the benefit of the doubt. My big caution is when you look at the main complaint. One of the complaints is the authoritarian bent, and when you look at people like Hugo Chavez and Viktor Orban, they were in office, they lost, and they came back. And that was when the problem started, because they felt there was a mandate. And you see a lot of people said, well, if this guy's in office again, maybe I ought to try to give him the benefit of the doubt. You're seeing that with the ABC defamation suit. You're seeing that with a lot of these tech people, even people like Mark Benioff, who's huge liberal, saying, well, we need the benefit of the doubt. So I'm an optimist, and I hope things work out. But we will see. What say you, Carrie?
Well, I think I'm a bit more optimistic than you are, Dave. I'm really excited about this Tax Cut and Jobs Act. renewal that's coming down the pipeline. I think there's some really important provisions that are going to be expiring. And the Tax Foundation estimated around 2/3 of families at least are going to see their tax bills go up unless there are changes made. So I think the stars really aligned to have this reboot. So that's exciting. I'm excited about the Doge Commission with Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. It remains to be seen whether or not they'll actually, come to fruition. But I think if anybody can do it, they can do it. So I'm excited. But Karina, I wanted to ask you about your work with victims of communism. If you could just share a little bit with our audience what you guys do. And you mentioned that you think this new Congress and White House will be supportive of your events or your efforts. What will that look like?
Sure. And look, Dave, we have to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. The people voted the president in. And so I think he's had 4 years to kind of decompress and get himself together. So we might see a new Trump approach, and we're definitely hopeful for that. So, but for victims of communism, we are a bipartisan nonprofit based here in Washington, D.C. And our mission is to educate the public on the horrors of communism. As you know, this is an evil ideology. This is something that I have a personal connection to. I was born and raised in Soviet Ukraine, immigrated here when I was 8 years old with my mother and my grandparents. And I remember just how horrible it was in certain parts of our lives where we had people constantly watching us. We had rations for food. I remember my grandmother telling me when I would go outside to play with my friends, this is at 5, 6, 7 years old. Don't tell people anything about your family. Don't tell them what's going on in the house. If you come across any sort of quote unquote money that could be in the form of material goods or like a new pencil case, that would be questioned by the authorities. So this personal tie to communism is something that I want to ensure that America understands, especially the next generation, which is Generation Z. And the Victims of Communism Museum and Foundation have projected, we have done studies and surveys with this next generation, and about 30% of them, 30% sympathize with a socialist communist regime, which to me is extremely scary and is not something that America needs. And the reason why people come to this country, why they uproot their entire lives, why they risk their lives, risk their everything that they have, just to come here for freedom and opportunity. So the Victims of Communism Foundation does a fantastic job of educating policymakers. We work with embassy partners. We work with coalition partners to not only memorialize those who have suffered under this regime and give them, an opportunity to be recognized. We also are trying to ensure that this next generation understands just what slippery slope they are going down by aligning themselves with this regime. And so, Carrie, for your second question as to why having a majority in Congress would be beneficial to us, we just recently passed the Crucial Communism Teaching Act, which would allow states an opportunity to use our resources, our educational resources, to teach about communism in the school system. And I think that's where we're lacking. The majority of our kids, before they even go to college, they're already indoctrinated in the grade school and the high school levels. And so this is something that is a huge win for us. And having the majority in both the House and the Senate, and having the president being very supportive of this cause, I think is going to get us over that hump, and we'll get this bill signed.
Well, I think that a lot of people can confuse communism and authoritarianism, and I think a lot of people who are not necessarily buying into that philosophy overall lean or consider it, or maybe don't refute it as much because it gets down to feeling safe, and that's what people want to feel economically secure, and they want to feel safe. And that's why I think, even though crime soared under Trump and has gone down under Biden, though in fairness, that was because of COVID and COVID ending. But the border particularly, I think, led people to feel that they weren't safe. And I think Greg Abbott, if I were going to give someone who gets the underrated assist to getting Trump reelected, it was he, because by sending migrants to these liberal cities, he nationalized the problem. So people said, you know what, if Eric Adams is complaining about it, if the teachers union loving mayor of Chicago is complaining about it, maybe this is a national problem. Maybe this just isn't something that people in Arizona and Texas are dealing with. And I think that is why people consider or see the appeal of authoritarianism. And you see it a lot more in young people because they're saying they want to feel safe. And there's a lot of, you look at people under 55 versus people over 55, and how pessimistic those under 55 are, whereas opposed to how optimistic people over 55 are in terms of their own lives, the country, and all that. And I think, so I understand it. Hopefully it will pass as things fade. The only other comment I would make is I caution anyone to read too much into an election. Every president seems to overread an election. Remember in 2004, when George W. Bush was the only other president since his father to win the popular vote, and Karl Rove talked about this enduring Republican majority that was going to last for decades. Well, 2 years later, they lost Congress. 4 years later, Obama had, huge House majority and a filibuster-proof Senate. So I would caution the administration to not overread this. I think people voted, even a lot of people who supported Trump thought he was a threat to democracy, thought he was incredibly corrupt, but they were voting, frankly, more to say F you than they were to say thank you. And so I'm hoping that there'll be at least a modicum of humility here, and people won't try to overread it. But unfortunately, that may not be the case if you look back at history.
Well, I think overall our country is a center-right country. Like, we were founded, like, people like choice. They like consumer choice. That was one of the big, differences. Like, we've always had consumer choice in America. Other countries, not so much. And so it's something we don't like to give up. And so that's why I think the economy was the number one issue, is because Americans are sensitive to that, because we are accustomed to a much higher quality of life. For example, I was just looking at some OECD numbers. Our median household income, again, median, that's 50 percentile. So average, median, not even average, median. 50th percentile household in the US is 25% wealthier than the median German household, and 60% wealthier than the median Italian household. And the United States, our stock exchange, for example, we have 65% of the market capitalization of the entire world in our stock market. We live in abundance, and we're used to that. We are a capitalist country. And so that's why I think sort of this sense that, Bernie Sanders came very close in 2020 to getting the nomination, and yet his own party put up that firewall against him. I mean, you can say that was anti-lowercase d democratic against him, but at least I've heard Nancy Pelosi say multiple times, this is a capitalistic country. I remember her basically dressing down a kid who seemed like he was in his 20s, who was like attacking. And she said, listen, kid, we're a capitalistic country. This is Nancy Pelosi. So I think the AOC types, and it's interesting, Dave, because you mentioned optimism. Socialism and communism are inherently deeply depressing. They're rooted in jealousy. They're rooted in aggression against your neighbor. And that's the opposite of capitalism, which is it's more about who can succeed based on competition and, driving up value versus tearing down value. So I think ultimately, at least that's my perception of America versus the rest of the world. But Karina, what do you think?
Carrie, you're spot on. So there is this idea of a security blanket that communism provides. And I remember even growing up being indoctrinated to believe that as soon as you leave the borders of safety or the Soviet Union, you will be destitute. You will not make it in life. The government is here to provide everything for you. Why would you ask for anything more? And that's how they keep you. And that's how they keep you down from wanting to achieve more. And I think that's really sad. Again, this is why people flee their countries to come to America for opportunity, freedom, religious liberties, and the things that we sometimes take for granted on a regular basis. But the rest of the world doesn't quite have the ability to understand that this is what their potential is. And you notice people don't flee America. People flee to America. And I think that's a really important fact to understand because everyone always says that, oh, with this election or whatever election, if they don't have favorable results, then they're going to go to Canada or, move somewhere else. Well, good luck. Come back when you're ready.
Bob Oprah.
We'll send you a one-way ticket. And I guess too, with these communist countries and totalitarian regimes, we should do the same with this next generation and give them a taste of what real communism looks like and what it feels like and experience it on a daily basis, not just go there for tourism and go into the big cities where they're just like, oh, wow, this is so great. Everyone's working together. Everyone is so communal. It's for the greater good. And it's not, because it keeps you at a level where you're all the same. There's zero opportunity for upward mobility. And, with that, they as the authorities are imposing on your everyday beliefs and freedoms.
Well, I think another reason, and I always tell people this, is that whatever you think of Donald Trump, he is the symptom. He is not the problem. Populism gave us Donald Trump. Inequality gave us populism. The inequality in this country is the greatest it's been since the Gilded Age of the 20s, 100 years ago. And by the way, if you look back at the Roaring 20s, as they were called, we had the same nativism, crap on immigrants, deport people, isolationism, America alone, we don't need our allies, and protectionism, tariffs. That got us the Great Depression and World War II. So that is what worries me most about the Trump administration. You look at a lot of these people that supported him, so much of their success really depends on him not doing what he said he was going to do. And there was a front page article, the Wall Street Journal, that said, business leaders are surprised at Trump's pushback on their efforts to get him to back off tariffs. And my response is, duh. I mean, what did you expect? And I also would say, as far as opportunity, that dreadful tax act that you're supporting, Carrie, 81% of it went to the top 1%. And there's been an upward redistribution of wealth as a philosophy of the Republican Party. When we had the Gilded Age of the 20s, 100 years ago, we actually instituted policies to address it. We created an income tax, we created Social Security, we created banking regulations. You're seeing none of that now, and the country has become far more oligopolistic, okay? And that costs the average American household $5,000 a year. And I'll give one example, okay? In Europe, you have 10 airlines control 70% of the market, and they're all high service airlines. In the US, 4 airlines control 80% of the market, and not one of them can crack the top 30 in service. So this has been, I'm not blaming either party for this, but it's been a trend in American society that I think is very troubling. And that's why you've seen a lot of pushback and you've seen a lot of economic anxiety, because people think the system is rigged. And frankly, in many ways, it is.
Well, we're going to have to disagree as usual, civilly, Dave, on the tax bill. So again, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, according to the Tax Foundation, average family of 4 making $75,000 is projected to see their taxes increase by $1,500 if Congress doesn't do anything. And Tyler Cowen, who's an economist at George Mason University, he ran the numbers and he found that total tangible corporate investment went up by 11%, which contributed to a long run increase of GDP of 0.9%. And a lot of that was manifested in higher salaries, higher wages, higher bonuses, and more hiring of workers and everyday Americans. So I disagree, and we can disagree with this. And you can't disagree with the fact that Trump oversaw record prosperity under his.
He
under
did
his
not. He ranked
Yeah.
seventh in terms of GDP. And if you look at his overall economic
No,
record,
I'm talking about inequality, and when you're talking about average families,
inequality widened.
You had the highest. Hey,
Hold on. Let me just respond,
I didn't
because
interrupt you, Dave. We had the highest among Asian, Latino, Black households, women households record.
until Biden, then they were higher under Biden. All of those were higher under Biden.
Yes, but we're not acknowledging that Trump oversaw it. So, like, yes.
No, I'm just saying that the trend.
But the thing is, it actually had an effective net pay cut because he had 20% inflation, whereas Trump did not. So on balance, the wages might have been higher.
No, actually, wages, you're wrong again. Real wages, even when you take out inflation, actually went up under the Biden administration. And I just got to push back on this tax cut, because this is one of the most specious arguments people use. Right? 81% of it went to the top 1%. For the first 3 years, there were some middle class lollipops in there. Those faded out. Surprise, surprise. Top earners' income cuts did not phase out. And plus, you cut taxes when the economy is struggling, not when it's booming. That's when you raise taxes. Clinton proved that. He passed the biggest tax increase in history, and we had the biggest boom in history, which once again proves that supply side economics is BS. But even people who push it know it's BS, but they're just going for the upward redistribution. But the other thing is, yes, corporations got a huge windfall when the corporate tax rate, the statutory rate, was cut from 35 to 21%. And there was but the effective rate was at already about 19%, which is about average for the industrialized world. So of course, corporations, 11%, that was pretty abysmal considering the windfall that they got. But let's move on to the most important topic. Well, not the most important, but the most interesting topic, and that is the nominees. And the four ones that are really considered the most problematic are Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., and Kash Patel. And so I guess my first question would be to both of you. Do you support all four of them? Are there any nominees that you don't support?
Carrie, I can take this first, but the president put these people into these positions for a reason. Obviously, he saw something in them that stands out that he believes will be good for those specific roles. And I think the president is doing something completely different than what he did when he during his first term. And he is looking at people who understand the bureaucracy. He's looking at people who are disruptors in the industry. And I think that's really important, given that they're setting up a completely new department, the DOGE department, to get rid of the bureaucracy, to cut the fat. And being in that industry for almost 14 years, I have seen how much money is wasted on duplication, redundancy of human capital resources, and it's astronomical. And I think having disruptors in those roles, which are really important departments, would give us, the U.S., an edge over our adversaries. And I think, I come from the Intel DoD side, and having someone like a Pete in there, I think would be an interesting take, especially with some of those high-ranking generals who will do everything in their power to stay in power and to ensure that some of these programs are getting pushed and the funding of them is also coming through, because that's their livelihood. We need to invest more in technology that actually helps us gain an advantage in the next century. The war is not going to be on the ground like it used to be. It's going to be in space and cyber. And we need to get ahead of China and Russia in those domains before we start looking at other policies that the Biden administration, for instance, put into place, specifically the woke policy, specifically where military recruitment was based on getting folks to join because they would get free surgery to transition from one gender to the next.
Oh, come on. That's like two people. That's such a, come on, seriously.
But the reality is, people were put in positions where they had zero business being there.
Like
and that
there were two of them.
Well, when the other side, when our adversaries and the rest of the world is looking at this, they're laughing at us. They're laughing at us.
Speaking of laughing, the arguments you've made are actually the precise reason that Pete Hegseth has no business even. I mean, he is spectacularly unqualified. He is comically unprepared. And by the way, for someone who got elected as part of his platform that the world is on fire, it's also gross negligence because you need someone that has experience running a bureaucracy. You need someone who can deal with the ins and outs of a $900 billion budget. Please tell me how Pete Hegseth, and I would get this from Carrie too. How is he? And this is, by the way, this is not even getting in to all the sexual allegations, the fact that he doesn't think women should be in the military. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, putting that aside and the fact, I don't know if you heard, but did you hear about the man, Carrie, who was escorting him around Capitol Hill yesterday? Do you know who that is?
No, who?
Well, as always, please allow me to educate you. John Jacob Heisenbaum was a guy who basically kicked the crap out of a civilian. And Pete Hegseth is just another example of how he defends these derelicts who have been accused of heinous crimes against their own fellow officers or against civilians. But please, I'll open up to both of you. How is Pete Hegseth qualified to be defense secretary? I'll start with you, Carrie.
Well, he's a decorated military combat veteran. He
so
is
10,000 other people.
Okay. So
how does that qualify you to run a huge organization?
That doesn't mean anything?
Not when it's great. I mean, it's noble, it's honorable, but how does that qualify you to run a business? It wouldn't qualify him to run GM. How does it qualify him to run the
Dave, I think you're missing the point of Trump's election, which is people don't want status quo.
Answer the question. You're not answering the question. How is he qualified besides serving? What else?
Because he's a very intelligent person.
Oh,
he has a Princeton undergrad. It's like
I thought the Ivy League was bad. I thought it was woke. I thought that was a strike against people that if you went to Harvard and Princeton.
Well, he actually, as I recall, he actually ripped up his Harvard degree live on Fox.
Okay.
But,
I see.
Dave, I think you're missing the point that you are looking at the lens of a normal bureaucrat, but the problem is the normal bureaucrats have created a mess. They didn't fire, as I understand it, not a single person was fired when we pulled out of Afghanistan. That is a moral failure.
I'm not defending it, but you're not answering the question, though, other than going to, I mean, the fact that other than going to Harvard and being a decorated veteran, that he's qualified, which means otherwise he's not. So I will give our distinguished guest
Dave,
a chance. Maybe she can come up with real reasons because you're not coming up with a single reason.
Dave,
that's verified. And by the way, let me just say one more thing. I agree with you. First of all, a president should have a right to appoint whomever he wants. And I think a lot of these nominees, they wouldn't be my choice, but you know what? Like the Secretary of Energy, I think that's not someone I agree with philosophically, Mr. Wright, but president has the opportunity to do that. But when it comes to the Pentagon, when it comes to when the world is more dangerous, certainly than it was 8 years ago, but Marvin, someone who is so grossly unqualified. So are there any nominees that you would oppose? Do you think Kash Patel is good for the FBI? How about Tulsi Gabbard, that Syrian-loving Putin talking points person? Is she qualified? Are there any nominees that you would oppose that Trump has nominated?
Dave, I think you're misunderstanding, again, the point of a
You're not answering the question. I'm asking you a question. You're giving me the big picture to avoid answering the question.
No,
Are there any nominees that you would oppose? Yes or no?
I would, as of right now, I wouldn't oppose any of those. I
Okay.
would vote for them. And David, I think again, the point of a political appointee is their instincts and their judgment and their loyalty.
Judgment? A guy who's been accused and convicted of sexual, he had a woman sign an NDA?
That wasn't a conviction of
You're telling me
anything.
about judgment?
No, there were no there were no charges. You said the word convicted. That is factually wrong. Convicted implies a judicial system involvement when there were no charges filed.
There was settlements, but the point is, if you have someone sign an NDA, there's obviously a lot going on. The funny thing is, let that woman release her from the NDA. If you have nothing to worry about, let her speak. But anyway, I let our guests talk because we've been monopolizing this. Are there any nominees that you would oppose?
As of this time, I would not. And look, at the end of the day, I'm not the president. I'm not the one choosing these folks. We just hope that they do the best job that they can when and if they get confirmed. And they will also have advisors with them. So it's not just the top dog. They're just at the top managing the entire department. But there are so many people that are involved in these departments and in the decision making that these nominees are leading, but they're not necessarily the ones making all of the decisions below that level. And look, corruption is everywhere. We've seen it with Democrats. We've seen it with Republicans. It's part of human nature. We had Bill Clinton in office talking about how he did not have relations with that woman, an intern, right? An intern, a White House intern. And, and that's a sitting president. So I mean, Hillary Clinton with her emails in Syria, right? I mean, or Benghazi, I'm sorry. You can get all the dirt. You can start bringing all of these things up. People are people, regardless what party. I'm just hoping that whoever is in charge, whoever is leading these organizations, is able to put their egos aside, listen to the people who are their advisors, who understand how the dynamics work, and finally get us back into an environment where the bureaucracy is not overpowering, where we can actually be effective and efficient, get back to our position as the world leader on a lot of different things, economy, diplomacy, tech. And that's where I am very hopeful that this administration, this go around, has looked at all of that and has started to put people in place that will truly guide us in that direction.
Well, first of all, I think any Trump supporter pontificating about corruption is pretty rich, because the grift from this administration was greater than any other administration. Second of all, Carrie is conflating what the misreading the election with lack of qualifications. And the Senate does have an advise and consent role. And when someone is grossly unqualified, now I think Pete Hegseth, a lot of senators, and I have to say, I was really disappointed in Joni Ernst, because she's an upstanding person and she crumpled. And these, at least this MAGA crowd is trying to pressure people and threaten primaries. And I always give credit. Trump said at his news conference in Mar-a-Lago that he would not necessarily get people primary. But in Pete Hegseth's case, I think a lot of senators are just going to depend on gravity to sink this nomination. So my prediction is that Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth will go down. Unfortunately, I think RFK is the one who could potentially do the most damage. And Kash Patel, unfortunately, gets to float under the radar. And President Biden, with that disastrous pardon, which is just another self-inflicted wound, which has about a 22% approval rating nationally, took the spotlight off of a guy who said he was going to close, was an enemies list, and said he was going to close the FBI headquarters and turn it into a museum of the deep state. I mean, these are the kind of people that you do not need to have. And I'm hoping the Senate will do its job, but unfortunately, the history of Republican senators showing spine when it comes to Trump is not very encouraging.
Well,
Carrie?
we're running over, so we gotta wrap it up.
Yes.
But
Okay.
yeah, I think we should give people the benefit of the doubt. Let them see what they can do.
And we'll see what happens in the hearings. I think the hearings will come out. I think the hearings, apparently Tulsi Gabbard had a really bad week on the Hill. I think the hearings will sink her, and I think Hegseth's history will sink him. But sadly, I think Patel and RFK will make it through. But again, I'm optimistic. I really hope the president will say, you know what, I have a chance to really have a great legacy here. And I'm inheriting a good economy. I'm inheriting a time where our military is the strongest it's ever been. Our enemies are on their knees. Again, the Biden administration's messaging is so bad, but the achievements of Iran being weakened and Syria falling and Russia being weakened and Hezbollah being decimated, this is something that President Trump would rightly be pounding his chest about. But anyway, we'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. Very scintillating conversation. It's great to have you on the show. You can see we're spirited but civil around here. So I hope you will come back.
I very much enjoyed it, and thank you for the very colorful conversation.
It always is. It always is. Well, that will wrap it up for us once again at Practically Political. But thanks so much to our wonderful guest, and thanks to all of you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next time.